Greetings, everyone. My name is Simone Johnson, and over the last 8 years, as an interdisciplinary artist, researcher, and cultural worker, I've been working on solo and collaborative projects related to water, mostly in New York City in the Southwest, Arizona, and New Mexico to be exact, in the United States. And my next adventure is starting a year-long podcast called Meet Me at the Throughline, where I talk to guests from different walks of life about all things related to water, from mangrove trees and mermaids to oceanic worldmaking. I've thought about starting a podcast since 2022, and finally, 3 years later, it's happening. If you follow me on Instagram, you might have seen me post many times that I live, travel, and dream in the or a aquatic universe. And this has become a tagline I use to share how I'm experiencing life, but it's more than a tagline. It's a worldview and framework I have created to understand myself, to navigate the world wherever I find myself with my Gemini moon. Water is my through line. And as watery as water is, this element, spirit, being, consciousness is actually what keeps me grounded in my sense of self. And from this place, I connect with the other glorious elements and the rest of life, grief, and death. I think sometimes when I share about living in an aquatic universe or talk about water worlds, people might imagine a solely liquid existence or liquid world when, in my mind at least, living with a watery worldview and slash or visiting water worlds means that, and this is actually true, I love and work with plants, herbalism, and cooking, that I find myself in the desert lands of the Southwest often, that I'm a Sagittarius rising, a mutable fire sign. And so, as I shared in my recent newsletter, Dispatches from the Celestial Sea, living in the aquatic universe oftentimes collapses my identity or what I think the aquatic universe is. I would love to share an excerpt of what I wrote in this newsletter. On December 30th, 2024, I said, "So much can happen in 3 to 4 months. Because now I'm in the high desert of New Mexico, and it's been such an interesting experience so far. It seems like every time I come back to Arizona and New Mexico, both a part of the desert continuum, a term I came across in the desert issue of the Fundamentalists magazine, my identity, especially as it relates to water, collapses. It's like I can't just be a visitor in places. I have to find myself in the place I'm in order to make sense of why I'm there. I think one of the gifts and challenges of traveling throughout the aquatic universe is that my own ideas of the universe I'm co-creating are regularly challenged, reframed, and reimagined. I was feeling this when I came back to Arizona in the fall of 2021 and lived there for almost 2 years, wondering if I was still in the aquatic universe living in arid lands. And if you've seen my project Under the Radiant Sun, you will need a Tumblr account. I share about my mermaid awakening in the desert last year. That was 2023. I'm pretty sure 2023. And that seems like the least likely place to experience such a thing. Many times when I would complain to someone about how much I hated the Phoenix metro area and feeling like a sea star drying out in the desert heat, someone would remind me that where I lived and breathed used to be an ocean. I'm not sure how I relate to ancient oceans that are not oceans anymore, but I'm trying to find ways to connect with the land, waters, and sky in the Southwest, finding grounding and connection through plants, herbal medicine, and moments of sunbathing. And also, since I've written this, taking walks. I just started taking walks in this dried up arroyo, and I just feel really connected to walking the path of the arroyo on the land there. If you want to subscribe to my newsletter, check out the show notes where I'll put the link. This is what I want to express through this podcast. That yes, there will be interviews and conversations about mermaids, mangrove trees, and oceanic world making, but also topics that people might not associate with water. On this podcast, I want to talk about love, the human body, birth, ancestry, astrology, art, music, plants, and herbalism, sailing, marine science, the list goes on. Really just broadcasting what I want and perceive to be a part of the aquatic universe that I live in. I've introduced myself already, but to share a little bit more, I mostly grew up in Brooklyn and Staten Island in New York City and lived there until I was around 27, like solidly lived there until that age. And then in 2019, 2020, I became somewhat nomadic after traveling internationally a few years before, visiting Costa Rica, Panama, Mexico, and Cuba. I think a lot of people know me as once being really active in the agriculture, dance, performance art, and teaching artistry worlds in New York City. But way before these past lives, I was obsessed with traveling around the world and was considering being a teacher at an international school. But alas, I chose a different direction. I still love traveling though. I haven't left the country in years, and I wonder when's the next time I'm gonna get to go to another country. In 2017, I started my water art practice in Staten Island, New York City, and had no idea it would be what it is today. In the early days of my explorations of water, I didn't see myself as a holder of the wisdom and medicine of water, but over 8 years later, I embrace this huge part of my identity in life. Starting this podcast is one way I'm hoping to not only share my perspective, uplift other people's voices and work, but to be in some kind of service, to be of service. I'm excited to launch Meet Me at the Throughline, especially because the North Node is in Pisces. I'm excited to launch Meet Me at the Throughline when the North Node is in Pisces. There will definitely be episodes about astrology because I'm an astro nerd and I've been interested in water and astrology for years, like the relationship between the two. Uh, and Jupiter is also in Gemini as I record this episode. And I read somewhere last year, probably on Instagram, how Jupiter being in Gemini is a great time to start podcasts. So look at that. A couple of things I want to get off my chest on the first episode is first, in my own personal life, the through line for me is water. And as I said before, water is not only a gassy, liquid, solid substance for me. Water, like the other elements, contains vast consciousness, and that is my through line. For other people, the concept of or experience of a through line, well, let me say that again. For other people, the concept of or the experience of a through line could be something else that makes sense to them. That is okay. I think this podcast will appeal to some folks and not others, or some episodes may resonate with you more than others. And I just want to acknowledge that Meet Me at the Through Line may not be everyone's cup of tea, and that's fine. Secondly, you never know who I'll meet at the through line, and I love that. One episode could be about water quality or salinity in marine life. The next one is about the physical, mental, emotional, energetic, and spiritual aspects around the spine. Whew, I know that was a lot. And the following episode after that one is about birth stories. I liken this podcast to free improvisation and jazz music within a thematic, fast, fluid structure of water. I just want to be free, y'all. I just want to be free to interview whoever I want to interview, you know? So buckle up, folks, because we are going on an adventure. Finally, I've tried to start a podcast since 2022, like I said. And besides not having time due to work and just trying to survive in the world, I always felt like I needed to have all the things before I could start. I needed money, the best equipment, to do hours and hours of in-depth research to make sure everything was everything. But what's the easiest way to start a podcast in this day and age? Well, I've had a Substack newsletter the last 3 years and noticed a while ago how Substack has a free feature to start a podcast. I can upload the episodes on YouTube too. YouTube is free. What's the easiest way for me to start a podcast? I do want to acknowledge, though, that a computer and Wi-Fi are needed. So starting a podcast may not be entirely that easy and accessible for some people to do. And I just want to say that I don't want it to sound like, you know, it's just so easy, because it may not be easy for a lot of folks. Starting, though, can be the hardest part, starting a project. I already know this podcast journey, and any kind of media communications I'm working on is going to be filled with learning and growth. In saying all this, I kindly ask you, dear listeners, for grace, as this is my first time doing a podcast, my first time interviewing people in such a public way. And maybe for a lot of the guests, it's their first time sharing publicly. It's really you're showing yourself. You're putting yourself out there to be perceived. And I don't know, sometimes that's, that's, that could be a big move for some people. And, so I hope you give us space for imperfections and improvements. Well, this is it for episode 1. I'm so excited that you are here listening to this. Please stay tuned for episode 2 and beyond. Thank you for joining me at the Throughline.